discuss that. That is a particular interest to me, the delegation versus doing. Totally support the theoretical model, but want to understand in terms of when a task or function is delegated, who remains responsible for the quality of the product? Is it the delegator or the person that it is being delegated to? That's one question. And then kind of a subset of that is, how do you ensure that the responsibility that is being delegated is being delegated to a person or group that has the skill set to perform whatever it is that's being delegated? So that's kind of, in terms of delegating and doing, that's what I'm interested in.
Okay, so I'm not sure the camera picked up the question, so I'll kind of paraphrase it. So one is, when you delegate something, who retains the responsibility to make sure the product comes out to what it needs to be? Correct. And the second one is, how do you make sure that the person that's getting delegated to can actually perform the work?
Correct.
Okay. When you go from an IC position to a leadership position, the focus of your job needs to change. And that's probably the hardest transition period that somebody has. The focus needs to be, how do you build up your team so that they're better at what they do, so that the team itself and the organization itself functions on its own without the leader. If the leader becomes the integral part of the organization, what happens is the organization can't progress forward without the leader. And what happens is you start getting into paralysis in the organization, or even at the whole facility, where everything is having to go through this leader in order to be accomplished. So what you want to do is you want to start out small. You want to take a look at your organization and say, what skill set do I currently have? Most likely, you got promoted because you were the best individual contributor in the organization at the time. So you've been rewarded and promoted for the very thing you don't want to continue. And that is being a good performer yourself and continuing to expand your abilities versus being a leader and growing your group. So you have to do two things when you delegate. One, you have to start thinking about who you're going to give the task to. And you have to be careful because you have the tendency to say, okay, who's the next best performer in the organization? I'll just give them everything. And that tends to happen a lot. And so what you see is 20% of the organization does 80% of the work. And that's where you also run into trouble, because when someone leaves or retires, now you've lost the ability to perform again. Okay? So you have to start out slow by handing out an assignment, making sure that you clarify what it is exactly you want as the product. So when you're starting the delegation process, it takes much more communication and much more work. In fact, it probably takes you longer to give the assignment, track the assignment, and close the assignment than if you did the assignment yourself. I can tell you this, there's some assignments I could do in 10 minutes. A lot of assignments I could do in 10 minutes. Unfortunately, if I did that, the organization doesn't know how to do it. And if I'm gone on travel, if I get sick, someone else comes into my job, then my organization isn't going to be able to perform. So I need to give that assignment, define exactly what's needed and what's required, and follow up on that assignment with that person to see that I got what I needed. When you get the product back from the person, the other thing you don't want to do is just correct it. If you do that, they've also not learned how to do it. Instead, you must discuss it. You must take a look at whether it's a viewfoil pitch or white paper and say, well, I don't feel like this information is in there, and I believe we're trying to get this accomplished with the customer. How do you think we could change that product, whether it's a presentation or a white paper or a product, missile? How can we change that to give the customer what they need, or how to get the point across to management, or how do we accomplish the goal we're trying to achieve? And you start talking to them about that. Well, what if I added this? Well, what if I added that? What if I added this? And you walk them through that process until they've now changed it. They've changed it to give you the product you need. Now the next time when you ask for that product, you're going to get something much closer. and then you go through that coaching process again, and you get something much closer. Pretty soon, you get to the point where you're able to hand it off to that employee, and you know you're going to get the product you need. They email it to you, you scan it, and you send it on. So it's gone from this very high-intensive, labor-intensive task of delegating to now a very much smaller task of delegating. But even at that point, when you're sending it to that person to get done, you know, what I do is I send the email and I email it back to myself because I don't save sent mail. Because if I did that, I'd have millions and millions of emails that I wouldn't know how to manage. So if I'm sending out an action, you'll normally see that I've added my name onto it. That means it comes back to me. It stays in my email. It stays in my email, and I go back to the person, and I usually put a clock on it. If it's somebody that I'm managing because they don't typically do it on time, I'll put a timer on it. I'll say when it's due, and I'll actually go in and put the flag, and it turns red in my email, and I'll send it back to the employee. Did this get turned in? Or I haven't seen your input on this. Or if they send me the input, then I delete the email, and I know the action's done. So you follow up to make sure the action is done that you've assigned to people. So in my case, maybe I send a project to Buddy, and I'll every once in a while send him an email saying, where are we at on this project? How much progress have we made? And he'll come back and say, well, here's the rough draft. And I'll look at the rough draft and I'll say, well, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? Well, come see me, and then we'll go over and discuss it. Well, I'd like to add this element to it. You know, but the problem with delegating is it's very labor intensive up front. But what happens is you start developing all the individuals, the other leaders who then also delegate, and those people who also delegate, and then you get to the worker bees, and everybody's working on it. Every level of the organization starts to get to the point where they can start to be self-sufficient. And so when an action comes in, you know, I forward it to Buddy, Buddy forwards it to Deanne, Deanne forwards it to Ron Dennis, the action gets done, it comes back to Deanne, comes back to Buddy, and it happens very quickly at that point. But at that point, you now have 5 different people that can do that action. So in an emergency situation, you have 5 people to do it, versus if I did it myself and didn't delegate it, I'm the only one that can do it. I'm gone. Well, did the input get in? No. Why didn't the input get in? Well, no one knew how to do it. No one knew what I wanted. Nobody knew what was required. Nobody knew what are the 5 or 6 things you need to think about on that assignment. So that's kind of the process you need to go through with delegating. And typically when a leader comes into their organization, and there's lots of people, a few in this room, that I won't mention, who tend to do it themselves for 2 reasons. One, it gets done the way you want. Typically because you're a good performer in the first place, and that's why you're in the leader role, you do it exceptionally. So you get an exceptional product. The other problem you have to run into is that you have to make sure when you're delegating and it comes back up, that you're coaching the person to get to that level of exceptionalness, okay? And not say, well, I'll just do it myself, or I'm just going to redline the whole pitch and send it forward the way I want it, and you've never brought them up to the level that you want them to be. So the problem you have is when you have an exceptional performer, they don't want to compromise the product. Because at some point you have to say, okay, this is the level of product this person's going to be giving me time after time. Is it at a level that will work? You have to ask yourself, is it at a level that it'll work? Is it going to do anything that's really a major disaster? If not, leave it alone. You can't bring everybody up to this exceptional level that you perform. You have to make sure you get it to the level you have to have it at, and you say, that's good. Because if you keep going to redlining things forever and ever, people get to the point where they say, I don't know why I'm doing this assignment. Carol's going to redline it anyway. I'll just give her crap and she can do the work. That's what we'll get. People will give you less and less and let you do the work. Because they're frustrated. If you want me to do it, let me do it. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, that makes great sense.
Okay.
But what also makes great sense is the fact that you, and nowhere in that process did you relieve yourself of the ultimate responsibility.
Right.
I think that's really key.
I'm responsible for anything that goes off this facility and anything that goes to the customer at this facility.
Exactly. But the other part of that, too, is a commitment as the delegator to get with whoever to clarify the assignment and to coach them into delivering a better product whether or not their current skill set allows them to deliver a good product or not.
Right.
So your point is that there's a commitment early on,
Right.
initially in the delegation process, where you know it's going to cost you more energy to just bring that person or group along.
Absolutely. You have to be committed as a leader to spend the time to coach and train and bring people along so that they can do it to a level that's going to be a good product for SwiftBack and make us look good. The other is, let's say you have somebody that does a really good product, you're sending it out every week, every week, every week, every week, every week. Okay? Every couple of months, you need to open the email and review it. Is it still at that high level of performance? If it is, you need to send them an email. I really appreciate the fact that I don't have to spend a lot of time because what you're putting out is always really good. Because that's what sustains that high performance. That's one additional step beyond the get them to the level you want. It's recognizing people who continue
Reinforcing
to
good
put out
behavior.
products that are exceptional and saying it to them. You know it. You see it in your email. You see the input. Went to program office. You didn't have to review it. And you didn't have to do any work, and it's wonderful, even though it shows up in your email. But once in a while, you need to stop and say, thanks. I appreciate that you're putting this out every week. I appreciate the fact that you're doing this every day in some cases. Because typically, like, I'll get the status from Retrobody every morning. And I get no feedback. Or if I do get feedback, it's, how come this isn't on it? But if it's good and it's good and it's good and it's good, at some point you also need to tell the person, I appreciate the fact that your input's always thorough and I don't have to go fill in the blanks and do extra work. You know, it's good to give that feedback to people. You know, the CAL reports and the people out there that work for you, that do all this routine work. Once in a while it's nice to look at their work, open it up, see that it is at the level that's really good and it's why you're ignoring it. Right? And say, you know what? I am so glad that you're doing this job because I don't have to spend time. And so I just appreciate that you're doing that. So think about that extra step that's even beyond the coaching and getting them to the level they need to be at. Because once you do that, it's wonderful here. I can give you examples this week where SwiftBack got an assignment from program office or from Jay or whatever, and the other 5 facilities are on the same phone call I am. And when they say, Carol, we need A, and we've already got B, C, D, E, F, G working, I still have the next person to assign it to. So that we're doing 8 things at a time. Where the other facilities are like, well, we only have, this person and this person that can work these 8 assignments, so, tell me, give me a priority list so I know when I can work on this. They can't support. And then what's even worse is they got people that can do the assignment, but we're not going to be able to do anything. We can't commit to anything. We can't give you a date. We can't give you anything until we clear it through the boss. Okay? So now, nobody can make a commitment unless it's the boss. Well, that's wonderful. What happens if they're on vacation? Oh, you're going to have to wait till next Monday. Well, hello, people. We need to get the work done. You need to develop people who can commit for you, that you have confidence in. And when you come back, don't change their decisions. Yeah, you might have to manage the fact that they made a decision or they made a commitment that's hard or that you didn't make, but they'll live through that. Don't change it. Because next time, they're not going to commit. Because Carol just changes it every time she comes. So don't change their commitments. Don't change their reports. If they're doing something while you're on travel, they're doing something. If you're delegating it to them, let them do it. And live with the result. Because they're going to live with the result, and they're going to learn from the result. So don't come back and say, okay, tell me the 25 decisions you made so I can change them all. Because that's what leaders tend to do. I can do it just a little bit better. I can put a little twist on it. I can tweak it. Well, if you're going to come back and do that, then they may as well just wait for you to come. Tell everybody, hey, we don't make decisions when Carol's gone. We'll answer you when she shows up on Monday. When I'm on vacation, I may look at my email, but I can tell you what I'm doing. I'm passing it on. Passing it on and passing it on. And I may pass on a little information with the email, but I'm not doing a lot of work. I'm passing it to all the people that I believe can do the job while I'm not there. And why can they do the job? Because I've been working with them for years and bringing them along and training them. And they say, well, I know what Carol would decide. You hear people say that all the time. I hear Terry say that to people. Well, if you really want to know, this is kind of what Carol would do. And so, I don't have to change a lot of things when I get back. So, I don't change Ron's decisions. I don't change Barry's decisions. If they're sitting in, they make the decision, okay, let's run with it. See what happens. If we fail, then they'll learn. We'll recover. We'll survive. If they make something that's totally disastrous, then I might get involved. But, so delegating is very complicated. And that's why people don't do it. And that's why people don't do it well. Because they're not committed to do all the things you have to do to delegate it and develop your organization to be able to respond to all the actions and all the products and pitches and but once you bring in everybody to that level, your job gets a lot easier, your team is a lot stronger, and then hopefully you're off promoted to the next level and your next leader takes your job, and it keeps that cycle going, and you develop a very strong, broad organization that can handle lots of things, lots of tasks. So does that help in the delegating realm?
And when you just spoke about, I think, was when you're developing the people from within the organization from time to time, group leaders or whomever might be sitting in for you. But when, like, for example, it's someone from another organization who's sitting in, there's starting to be this rumbling that it's really not worth it because you're just a name and a place. So how do you still allow some of those type people to sit in and give them a project that's safe?
Because as a leader, what you need to do is debrief them at the end of the assignment. Here's what you did well. Here's what you could have improved. Here's what I didn't tell you that I should have told you. Okay. And when someone's sitting in for you, I treat them like they're you. Okay, Mark Shanahan's sitting in for Nancy this week. Okay, I'm treating him like Nancy. I'm giving him feedback as if he is Nancy. I'm telling him, you missed this, you didn't do this, this is what you do next time. Okay, because if you don't, then he's not going to grow. And every job here has a different aspect that you got to learn and understand. So the whole point of having them sit in for you, doing a job that they're not in that organization, is for them to understand from your shoes, what is it that you have to do from your shoes and have to walk in your shoes and get the same meetings and get the same criticisms and get the same feedback. Not, well, I'll just ignore him and let him go back to his job. I mean, if you don't take that opportunity, yeah, it's more work. I've had to do more work this week because Mark's sitting in for Nancy than I would have had to do if Nancy was here. Okay? But that's what we're doing. Because for Mark to be a good senior manager someday, he needs to understand what it means to be in Nancy's shoes and what he's got to do and what he's got to complete. And so any assignments he did where he fell short, I coached him on it. Here's what you do. Here's what you add. Think about this. Think about that. Here's who to go talk to. Here's how to find out that information. So it's important when anybody sits in, but not just sitting in, but developing your organization and delegating. If you got 5 group leaders and you're delegating it across 5 people, if you get this favorite group leader who's really sharp and you start giving them all the really challenging assignments, now you've only got one strong leg in your organization. And then Jim Wrigley steals it. And now you have no strong legs in your organization. I tell people all the time, go take my very best people, because when you do that, then all my other people get stronger. And that's a concept that really works because it forces you to strengthen everybody in your organization. Because at any given time, any of those people will be succeeding and moving on and getting a better job. And then the next layer of people are there and they're ready to take over and to do that job. And they're cross-trained, and you have a very highly functioning organization versus one that gets paralyzed very easily because somebody's missing. When Germaine first went to training, every time she was gone, training was paralyzed. Then she started developing all of her people and letting them sit in. And now she's got Dan and Larry, and people who can step in, and it's as if there's no change in the cog. It just keeps running and running, and everything just keeps going smooth. They can handle auditors. They can handle, somebody. Oh my gosh, we're panicked. Jermaine needs to cancel her vacation. We don't do that anymore because now she's got strong leaders behind her. So, but those are my kind of what I learned over there.
Do you think it's a good thing to let people fail,
Absolutely.
even if it's a reflection on you while they're failing?
Absolutely. Absolutely. As long as their failure doesn't hurt anybody. In the sense that it doesn't kind of permanent damage or whatever. Failing sometimes is good.
So that if products are leaving the base that aren't particularly good, that you ultimately have a responsibility for, that's okay?
Sometimes it's good. Yes. Yes. I had a chart and I kept telling the people making the chart, you need to change this because people are misunderstanding it. They didn't believe me. I kept telling them, change the chart. They didn't believe me. The product kept going out, and then it was a major disaster because they misunderstood. And they came back to me and said, now I know what you're talking about. Now I see what you were saying. Yeah, they did. And they recovered from it. But it was painful. It was painful for me, and it was painful for them. But they learned.
We have to have a boss that's willing to take that pain,
Yes.
though, which is
Yes.
not normal.
That's not normal. No. Sometimes it is absolutely the best thing that you can contribute to your employees is being willing to take some of that flack. So that they can see how the community reacted to their product. If that makes any sense.
Well, there's a conflict there, doing the best job you can to make sure whatever leaves is a good reflection, and then just backing off and saying,
Right.
go ahead and let it go, and hopefully somebody will learn something from it.
Yeah, that's hard.
See, what I struggle with is that if you're a new leader, you have an expectation that the products that are getting put out have to all be great. And you don't have the experience that you have and the ability to have a spectrum of expectations and know that not everybody's a superstar. And you have the ability to say, I'm going to accept work that certainly isn't to your standard, but is acceptable to their standard. I think a new leader would have a big struggle because I'm thinking all the products of a new leader, they'd want to be really good. I would hope that all leaders hope that all their products are really good. I mean...
But it depended on how important is it to you that this person get it. Because if I change it, if I change the product to be to my standard, and they don't get it,
That is wasted effort.
when I'm gone,
Right, I get that.
and they don't get it, they're going to put out the product they would have put out when I was there.
And-
At least if I'm there, I can take the flack, let them get it, and then they've learned in it, they continue forward forever getting it, versus changing it because I said so.
Well, your point prior to that, I think, is excellent. If you just make the change, then they expect that you're their crutch,
Yes.
and I get that. So it's the coaching the people to understand the shortcoming of their product so they can raise the standard of their product.
Right.
That's the key to the whole thing.
Right. But sometimes you feel frustrated because you tell them and they don't get it.
Over and over.
And you tell them and they don't get it, and you tell them, so you let it go through. You let the chips fall where they may. They come back and they say, oh my God, now I see what you were talking about. Scott Billick got upset, or Becky Clark got upset.
But it's that's a remarkably unique feature of you. I don't think most people are willing to take the
I see the
heat
senior
on that.
managers doing that all the time.
Really?
Oh yes, I see the senior managers doing it all the time. They'll tell their manager twos, well, are you sure your ECD is what you can actually make? Because Carol expects you to make your commitments, and it's going to be painful when you don't make your commitment. And the person puts the ECD down, and they know they're not going to make that ECD, and they let it go down on the report. And when they don't make it, I send it back to Troy or Buddy or Barry and say, you guys didn't meet your number. This isn't acceptable. And the manager, too, comes into my office and I explain to them about commitments and what's, and you got to make your commitments and why you have to make your commitments. And you know what? The next time the ECD comes forward, they make that commitment.
In that scenario, though, you're the backstop.
But so is that manager.
Yeah, I got that. But boy,
Okay?
again,
Because they're allowing them to fail.
Right, but they've
In
got
front of me.
Exactly, but they're okay because they know you and they understand your philosophy.
Right.
And that's,
But they could assure their people never fail.
well, that's true too.
Right?
Right? That's true.
By changing the date. So yeah, they're taking risks too. They're taking risks with their manager twos so they can learn. But it's a safe environment. The manager, me and the managers know that we're doing that. So we allow some of that failure to occur because that helps fine-tune people. Because if there's never, ever any consequence ever, it's very hard for people to completely understand the consequences of their actions and their behavior and their products. If there's never, ever any consequences. So sometimes consequences are good. So long as it's not something that's going to cause us not to get a missile to the fleet or not to, we've ended up having to work a Saturday because somebody didn't listen to their manager telling them, you ought to do this, you ought to do this. If you don't do this, you're going to end up getting behind and you're going to have to work a Saturday. They don't do it. We get behind, we work a Saturday. So the whole crew, suffers because an engineer working for Buddy didn't do what Buddy said to do. Buddy let him fail. So we let some failure occur because that is healthy. Because it helps people learn. So I'm talking to you as leaders. I don't want you going out and failing. Okay? But you can't see failure as a disaster that you totally blow up at and then you get all upset about. And you need to understand you're going to allow some of that to happen so that you can use it as part of the coaching. It's no different than your teenage kid where you say, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this, you need to do this. Consequence. I told you you needed to do that. Oh, no, I get it. No, I understand. I should have worn my seatbelt. Should have done the speed limit. I should have turned in my homework. I should have. Yeah. But if I started at my level, instilling fear of failure in the organization, it's cascades. Because if I react and I'm all upset, well then, those senior managers are not going to take any chances. They're going to change everything their people do. So they can assure I'm never going to get upset again. And then the manager twos are going to do everything they can do to make sure the manager ones don't get upset because Carol's going to get upset. I mean, you can just flow it all the way to the bottom of the organization. Where fear of failure is such a big deal that people are paralyzed by it. So that's another whole part of the whole delegating and products and allowing people to fail and letting it be a safe work environment for people to learn.
Carol, isn't fear of failure sometimes that's almost an arrogance on a manager's part because they're going to take it that it shows that they're not the greatest, they're not the best. So you see a lot of managers that have that, it's almost an arrogance about failure that they're not going to allow or they get upset about it. And then, just as exactly like you said, then it flows down to the whole organization. So it's you got to learn to get rid of that arrogance from yourself to say, hey,
Right. So as a leader, wherever level you are in the organization, you have to say to yourself, I'm not going to let that fear go past me. I'm going to take the flak for the failure for my people and not pass it on. So if Jay's afraid of ops failing and he yells and screams and tells all the RDs that, he doesn't like it, I can't walk into my staff meeting and say, man, we're not doing that again. I'm not taking that kind of abuse from Jay. I'm not going to allow you guys to fail. I'm going to review everything that goes out of here. Everything that goes to Jay, I'm going to see. And pretty soon I just put this big grip on the organization, and everybody grips, and then pretty soon, okay, we got to have 5 people review it. The group leader's got to review it, and then the manager two's got to review it, and then the senior manager's got to review it, and then Carol's got to review it. Now we can turn the product in. Now how long is it going to take for us to do any of these actions? Oh my God, we've just added weeks to something that could have got done in a half a day. So yeah, I mean, it just is paralyzing. So as a leader, what I expect you to do at your level is, if it's happening above you, stop it. Don't let it pass on to your people. I try not to pass it on when it comes down to me. If I do it to you, try to keep it from passing on to your people, because I'm human too. You know, and some days I get tired and cranky.
You talk about the fear, though. The fear. Management doesn't try to perceive fear or send it down the chain, but the individual contributor down there that's got the responsibility, it's their fear also that you also need to coach and manage.
Yes.
And we've had a situation where, the production is out there, we need to get it done, but not enough time, too much to do. Now they start internalizing it.
Absolutely.
The guys running the floor or directing somebody, that fear then gets, it also cascades. So telling them, one of the things that
It'll cascade up.
it cascades up,
cascade
it
down.
down, so you got to be.
You're in the
aware of
middle
that.
trying to affect the cascading coming from both directions.
I've told them, if you don't do it, you can't make it.
Right.
Don't worry about it. We'll
Right.
manage it. So
Right.
there's also the individual fear when
Yes.
delegation happens.
Oh, absolutely.
And and some people internalize it, and it's a burden for them.
It is.
So it's something you need to be aware of.
Yeah. That's an excellent point. Any other questions on delegating versus doing? Okay. You want to go any of the other ones?
I'd say we can probably, let's just stop with that one today, because
Okay.
there's some other good topics, and schedule for a Thursday next time.
Okay.
We get more people that are here.
If
Is that
anybody
right?
who missed
Listen,
it wants to see it, we'll have it on DVD.
Does anybody else have anything they want to just throw out today, feedback or questions or anything?
Any burning thing that's going on in your life?
Having spent 4 years working for Carol, I learned a lot, so listening to her is a good thing.
You've had lots of coaching, huh? Of course, your people can coach you too, so I think I've had a lot of coaching from Mark as well. He still coaches me. Jim coaches
I've
me.
got one thing to ask or add.
Sure.
Delegating is a two-way street. Those that are, that work for somebody can delegate up to a manager and get help that way,
Right.
right?
Yeah, people tend not to do. Yeah, people tend not to do that.
Experienced it this week.
Absolutely.
I was on the phone with you. Hey, we've got a problem. So I think, I got issues. You delegate up, and you see what happens. So I think
Yeah, rather
it's
than
just not always coming down the hill to delegate to coach other people, but there's delegate to get.
You know what the
get
key
information.
point about it is don't try to be the hero. Don't be the person that's looking for all the accolades that come with getting it done. Be part of the team that gets it done.
Right.
So if it gets completed and Mike Fuller gets the credit for it getting completed, that's okay. It got done. The
Right.
manager doesn't need to have the glory, and the worker doesn't need to have the glory. It's the team that gets the glory from
Absolutely.
Right.
completing. Because when you complete it, guess what? There's something else that's going to occur again tomorrow.
Right. And it was an ideal thing for Shane this week because we were getting ready for start, and he had a showstopper.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and he was trying to get a hold of Joe, and he couldn't get a hold of Joe. He knew he couldn't wait to track Joe down. He knew he had to call because we were stopped. So he called me. He said, we're stopped, because he knew the only person that could fix it was the captain. So the sooner it got to the captain, so if he hadn't got a hold of me, my expectation is he would call the captain. Because the only person that could fix it was the captain. It happened to be the support we needed from the Marines. So he did exactly the right thing, delegating it up. And of course, if he's afraid to do that and he sits in his chair and he says, oh, well, they're not going to support us, I've got an excuse, we would have failed.
Right. I guess one thing I learned from you is what I call the wizard theory. You let the wizard perform, don't send the jester. You know, the court jester isn't the guy when you really need the wizard. So,
Yes.
so have the person that has the capability and the knowledge, or
Yes.
in this case, the power, authority of power to perform it. But remember, if you're in a chain of command, if the person above you isn't there, you are the top of the chain of command.
That's right.
So take the right thing that's right for the organization and the team to get the work completed.
Right. The other is, I've said this in meetings before, when people come to me because they want me to make a decision, and I'll look at them and I'll say, why is it that you've brought it to the least competent person to make the decision? And they look at me like, what are you talking about? My subject matter expert can make a much better decision than I can. So I don't understand why you're here asking me to make the decision, because all I'm going to do is ask my subject matter expert what the right thing to do is.